Coming up on Lawmakers, a joint legislative ethics committee dismisses a complaint lodged against Speaker Glenn Richardson. Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle announces his plans to create charter school systems. And budget briefings conclude after lengthy testimony. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, Wandy Lawson and David Zelski.
Good evening. Also on Lawmakers, Senator Chip Rogers visits the Atlanta Humane Society to promote his bill that would outlaw dogfighting.
And some of Governor Perdue's tourism initiatives are detailed during budget briefings. But our lead story tonight, the ethics complaint against Speaker of the House, Glenn Richardson, is dismissed. A legislative review committee has dismissed an ethics complaint filed against House Speaker Glenn Richardson. Lawmakers Sandra Paris joins us now live with more. Sandra.
David, the complaint was filed earlier this month by outgoing Democratic Party Chair Bobby Kahn that alleged an inappropriate relationship between Richardson and a utility lobbyist. But today, a review committee designed to look at complaints before they proceed to the full Joint Legislative Ethics Committee ruled there wasn't enough information to warrant further investigation. The three-member review committee, including Senate President Pro Tem Eric Johnson, Senator George Hooks, and Representative Lynn Smith, decided there wasn't enough evidence to proceed with the case. Democratic Party spokesman Emil Runge tells me he disagrees.
We think there was sufficient evidence. We think that that it was common knowledge here at the Capitol that Glenn Richardson was having an inappropriate relationship with a former lobbyist for Atlanta Gaslight, and we think that there should have been a more thorough investigation.
There was no evidence. There was no evidence against the Speaker that was presented.
House Republicans have rallied behind their Speaker. Representative Bill Hembry says he's happy with the ethics review process.
The process worked. We had a situation, it was presented. As I said, the evidence was lacking.
But House Minority Leader DuBose Porter says he would like to have seen a more open process.
This process that was taken in House should have been given an opportunity to be disclosed more fully. And I think because of that, you'll have a cloud on the issue itself and the process.
In a statement from Richardson's office, he calls the allegations baseless and says he looks forward to continuing the job he was elected to do. Now, Richardson's office says earlier this week another complaint filed by Kahn with the State Ethics Commission was also dismissed. Reporting live from the Capitol, I'm Sandra Parrish for Lawmakers.
Thank you, Sandra. Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle today announced a $1.6 million plan to give local school districts greater flexibility and additional career education. It's the substance of education proposals he's been promoting since his first day on the job.
I envision a Georgia in which we learn from that success and increase local control, expanding charter schools to charter systems. We have already seen excellence with our charter schools.
It's really all about local control, the ability for teachers, principals, and superintendents to come together along with board members and design an educational curriculum and have the flexibility to design an educational curriculum around the needs of individual students as well as communities. That's what the charter system and charter schools represent.
While there are individual charter schools like Tech High throughout Georgia, Cagle's Charter Systems Act provides $625,000 in grants to convert local systems to charter districts.
One thing that we heard the most of is that teachers can really do a great job if you'll untie their hands, and that's what we want to do, and that's what this initiative will promote.
Local systems would have the option of applying for charters. The state school superintendent says this bill can help reduce the competition that has existed between many charter schools and their local systems.
There was a lot of hostility and fear, but as we've seen places like Tech High and others that come along and have the support of the local board, those are the ones that are the most successful charter schools. Whether they're a startup or conversion, if they can come in and get off the ground with the support of the local school system, we see them to be much more successful. So this bill that says the whole idea is to have every school in your district be a charter, but it has to initiate from the local board, it helps guarantee that these are going to be successful charter schools.
Cagle also announced the Career Academies initiative to establish 5 charter vocational schools at a cost of $1 million, plus $15 million in bonds for construction and startup costs. Senate Education Chair Dan Weber says he expects to introduce that legislation on Monday.
Budget briefings continued today, and they began with the Department of Natural Resources. Commissioner Noah Holcomb presented new programs in his department, several of which are pet projects of Governor Sonny Perdue. Lawmakers Jesse Freeman joins us now live with more. Jesse.
Well, David, the governor's Go Fish idea made some people curious and others cynical when he announced it last week. Today, the Natural Resources Department gave an idea of what all that program will entail.
DNR Commissioner Noah Holcomb talked about his 3 main spending priorities today. The first was the Go Fish program that Governor Sonny Perdue has talked so much about.
We want to have a bass trail, a tournament trail. We've got about 15 sites that are potential identified throughout the state, primarily on major reservoirs and bodies of water. So the access is one important part of that. Promotion. And there's a number of ways to promote. Part of that may be through a visitor center is certainly another one. And then habitat improvement is the final prong, the leg of that 3-legged stool.
Holcomb also spoke of $50 million for land acquisition projects, including one for Paulding Forest in House Speaker Glenn Richardson's home county.
And there will be some forest legacy money in this Paulding. In fact, it's the #1 forest legacy project in the United States.
Also, in partnership with the Department of Economic Development, DNR will restore the Resaca battlefield near Dalton.
Specifically, money is to be used in large portion for the development of that visitor center on I-75 at Resaca Battlefield, which is already owned by the state of Georgia and operated by the Department of Natural Resources.
The Natural Resources Department has a $58 million overall budget. They do get some federal and donor money. They will be working in conjunction with the Department of Economic Development on the Go Fish and Resaca Battlefield projects. Reporting live, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
The State Department of Transportation Commissioner Harold Linenkohl outlined his department's $2.1 billion budget for fiscal '08. He told lawmakers some 500 road projects have been pushed to the state's long-range plan because the money just isn't there.
When we start looking at what is going on in the industry today, we've had price increases just like everybody else has on our construction products. We've had right-of-way costs go up, and then we've had something called, I think you'll see it down here, maybe it's called project modification. It's where we may identify a need today, and then by the time we get in there and actually do some more further activities in the project, we see we need to do more than what we had originally set up. Instead of costing $1 million, it might cost $3 million. So those type cost increases, those 3 things, have had a severe impact on our program. And when we've gone through this past fall and did the balance up by what is required on the federal law, and then balancing it by congressional district, then we found that we've got $19.2 billion worth of projects in the 6-year program. Federal law says we cannot have any more in that program than our expected revenues. Our expected revenues on the federal and the state side is only about 11.2. So what that's leaving us with is a $7.7 billion shortfall in the 6-year program.
What do you suggest to us as a deliberative body about funding so that we can finish these roads rather than wait 40 years down the road?
We need some kind of a funding source. And I'm not saying it's gas tax. I'm not saying that. But we do need something. It could be nothing more than we need to be looking at some other measure and do some kind of a user fee. There are states right now that are looking at measurements. If somebody drives 10 miles, then when they fill up with gas, there's a meter on their car and a meter at the station that adds it up, and they pay a tax based on 10 miles. If you drive an electric car, if you drive a gasoline-powered car, same thing, 10 miles. So that's what we're trying to face right now. When we're getting more hybrids on the road, that means our gas tax revenues are going to go down. So we've got to find a way. Somewhere in our industry, I'm not saying it's here in this body, but in our industry, we've got to find a way to get some type of a fee, sustainable fee, that measures a user fee instead of maybe a gas tax. Something like that. I don't have the answer. I wished I did.
Many lawmakers are opposed to an increase to the state's motor fuel tax.
Senator Ross Tollison is making a push for greater availability of alternative fuel in Georgia. Last week in his State of the State address, Governor Perdue mentioned tax incentives for Georgians who are involved in ethanol production. Senator Tollison sees this as an opportunity for all of Georgia. Earlier today, I talked with the senator about the future of alternative fuels in Georgia and the economic impact they could provide.
For agriculture industry and timber industry, I think it's probably one of the most exciting things since the invention of the plow for the agricultural world, because it gives another alternative for our crops, corn, soybean, those different type things, and switch grasses that we could use to create alternative energies. It will be cleaner burning. Right here in Atlanta, where we have air issues, air quality issues, this will help to alleviate some of those pressures. So environmentally it's much more friendly, and then it's obviously much more, will have a greater impact on the state's economy.
Georgia-grown crops and timber can be used to create this clean ethanol-based fuel. Senator Tollison's car is a flex fuel vehicle which runs on both gas and ethanol. Most major car manufacturers have been producing cars with this option for the past few years.
What's so important about it is it's E85. It's 85% ethanol made right here in Georgia. That E85 is made at Wind Gap Farms in South Georgia, but it's all produced right here in Georgia. So it's a whole new industry, a whole new tax base, and a whole new job creation industry for Georgia. And so my vision is to take this program and build a web out across the state, whether you're coming from Augusta or North Georgia or Columbus, and you can travel the state of Georgia and know that there are pumps available out there to refuel with the E85.
Senator Tollison added that the only current E85 fueling station off the interstate is near the National Fairgrounds in Perry, Georgia, where he resides.
The Georgia Ports Authority had good news for the Joint Appropriations Committee today. The authority budget was presented to the committee by Robert Morris, Director of External Affairs for the Ports Authority. We're having some trouble with that tape. Morris was able to stress to the committee today that Georgia's ports support nearly 276,000 jobs and that the state had a 1-to-1 import-export ratio last year.
The State Road and Tollway Authority also came to the Joint Committee with good news. The authority's budget is revenue neutral and its tolls are exceeding revenue estimates. Rosa Roundtree is the new Executive Director of the authority.
I'm pleased to say this morning that SRTA, State Road and Tollway Authority, continues to be a self-funding authority. So we're not here for funding. Thank you. Don't have any money to give back. We're continuing to provide a cutting-edge solution through financial, technological, and service innovation. This year alone, fiscal year 2007, we implemented the first time for the state of Georgia the Garvey program for DOT. We have the pleasure of having one of the best toll facilities, the Georgia 400, in the United States, with revenues still exceeding what the tracking and revenue projections were. We also have the pleasure of having a AAA bond rating, which helps when you go out to sell bonds, especially those Garvey bonds. So from all three bond rating agencies. And so with that, I'll entertain any questions.
Now, Representative Wendell Willard asked Director Roundtree about property the authority owns at Atlantic Station in Atlanta. She says the authority has not decided what to do with that property.
Today, Senator Chip Rogers toured the Humane Society in Atlanta to help gain support for Senate Bill 16, which will increase jail time and fines for those involved in dogfighting. Lawmakers Lanny Walker has more.
Under the proposed legislation, law enforcement would be able to arrest any individual for breeding, training, or selling canines for the purpose of fighting another canine. Individuals who house, advertise, or attend such activities could also be prosecuted under Senate Bill 16.
We've narrowly focused on dogfighting, dog-on-dog fights, and we want to put those people out of business first and foremost, because that really is the most heinous crime of all of them.
P.J. Smith, Public Relations Manager for Atlanta Humane Society, says hundreds of dogs are brought into the facility every month, and many of those are victims of dogfighting.
There are individuals that bring the animals in, they've got cuts on them, they're absolutely horrific. It feels the pain of the physical wounds, but also the psychological wounds. they almost can't be rehabilitated.
Senator Rogers says many crimes accompany dogfighting, such as gambling, illegal drugs, and even gang violence.
You show up at a dogfighting event, you're going to find illegal drugs, you're going to find illegal weapons, you're going to find people that are convicted that should be in jail, they're in violation of parole. Cleaning up dogfighting and stopping dogfighting will help in other areas as well.
Due to the crimes that accompany dogfighting, supporters say that if Senate Bill 16 is passed, it will not only help protect dogs, but the safety of our community as well. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Lanny Walker.
Now back to today's budget briefings. Presenting the budget for the Department of Human Resources today, Commissioner B.J. Walker was questioned about recent news coverage of DHR mistakes, including the death of a child who'd been returned to an abusive mother.
On the question of Natiana Banks, and that's her name, first of all, Natiana's mother is a very troubled individual. I see no reason why, and this is B.J. Walker talking, she's shown no evidence that she should raise children. She may have them, but I've seen very little evidence that she should raise them. When we hire our staff, we ask them to use their skill, their training to make good decisions. In this case, 4 individuals, none of whom were new to the agency, had between the 4 of them, they probably had 70 years of experience. For some reason, and God only knows what that reason was, decided that they would return Natiana to her mother. They no longer work for us. Those are not the kinds of decisions we expect people to make. We have taken some steps and continue, and every day we take steps. I guess I want to be clear about this. It in no way reflects our general practice when people make renegade decisions. But our intent is to also make sure that people are very, very aware of what decisions we expect them to make, and that if they're confused, ask somebody. The young lady who was a caseworker made the right choice, and she hadn't even been here but a couple of years. You look at her, she looked like a teenager. She made the right decision. And so when we looked at it, it is not about the caseworker decision-making. It was about the supervisor's decision.
And Commissioner Walker also explained how the department was handling a $4 million penalty levied by the federal government. DHR was fined for failing to complete the terms of a binding agreement.
It was a plan that was written in 2000 that was supposed to have been done by 2004. And we didn't have but a few months to make it come to fruition, and no one had really worked on it very diligently before I came. After we got through that whole discussion with the feds, they basically told us this is it, this is the way it goes. $4 million fine, and they sent the letter. We paid the fine out of our budget, because if we didn't pay it, we would start just like the IRS, penalties would assess from the 2004 date. And so that would mean we would have been in a deeper hole than that hole.
DHR will not appeal that decision. Commissioner Walker said she would prefer to focus on the upcoming federal review coming up in May.
Since being appointed Commissioner of the Department of Corrections, James Donald has stressed the importance of finding out which criminals we should be afraid of and which ones we are just mad at. In today's budget briefings, he stressed the importance of mental health and drug treatment programs, but added that Georgia's growing methamphetamine problem is rapidly increasing the prison population.
Last year, our prison population grew by 1,200. We're bringing in each month somewhere between 250 to 300 meth intakes a month. I was down at Jackson this morning at the diagnostic prison visiting and talking to some of those inmates, and I asked for a show of hands, and the group of inmates that surrounded me, there 80% of them had drug issues, principally meth. Indeed, we were faced with a drug epidemic here, and I know my good friend Vernon Keenan has talked to you about that, or will talk to you about that, where We've become sort of the southeastern capital for transiting meth on 75, 85, 95 that goes through our state. And as a result, we're having to deal with that. But one of the things we're taking a good hard look at is how many of those people are people we really, really need to be afraid of. How many of those people perhaps would be better served with some other alternative form of treatment or incarceration as they pay restitution, so that we can save those hard beds in our system for those who truly prey upon society, prey upon the weak and the infirm and our elderly.
Now, there were several questions about the problem of recidivism. When many inmates are released after serving their sentence, they are given $25 and a bus ticket. Commissioner Donald answered a couple of questions dealing with this situation.
When a prisoner max out and he's done his time, there ain't much we can do. At that point, we have no legal authority to keep him. And 97% of the prisoners in our system are going to come home. I was down in death row today. We only have about 103 down there. So they're going to come home. So what we're doing, perhaps you heard last year, the governor has an initiative we call GRIP, which is our reentry initiative, that we're bringing together all the state agencies in a collective way to make sure that we see them further in advance and make sure that we are able to work with their suitable housing and meaningful work issues before they get out.
Last year, the Department of Corrections received an average of nearly 300 new inmates every month.
Recidivism was also one of the key budget issues for Pardons and Paroles Commissioner Garland Hunt, who focused on a program called Residential Substance Abuse Treatment.
Residential Substance Abuse Treatment, we call it RSAT. And I want to discuss this concept with you because this is also an enhancement request. And as the questions were earlier, many of the questions dealt with how can we correct this turnover. In other words, those that are coming in, which we call recidivism, those that are coming out of prison and going right back into prison. And so this is also a part of our two-part mission. One is, of course, is to have informed parole decisions. The other part, of course, centers around how do we transition these offenders back into society successfully. And this is called our Field Supervision Division.
Chairman Hunt also said the department needs an online clemency navigation system instead of the current manual system. He says this transition would cost $2.6 million over the next 4 years and replace over 55 tons of paperwork.
When the Department of Public Safety went before the Joint Appropriations Committee today, they were not there to talk about money they needed, as to lament money they shouldn't spend. Colonel Bill Hitchens says the department cannot find people to fill the positions they are authorized to pay. He says they have 276 positions available, and the problem begins in recruitment.
All of the members of our department are very appreciative of your efforts to not only approve a 50-person trooper school in fiscal year 2006 budget. They greatly appreciate the fact that you're able to find the monies to add a second additional 50-man trooper school. Much to my chagrin, and for the first time in the history of the Georgia State Patrol, we could not attract sufficient applicants to fill either school. In the first school, which began in November of 2005, of the 50 positions, we could muster only 36 cadets. 25 graduated. In the second 50-person school, which began on January 1st, 2006, we could muster 35 qualified applicants. We graduated 24. Of that number, 5 have already resigned, which of the 49 graduates. So of the 100 positions that were funded, we realized 44 additional troopers.
Now, Colonel Hitchens says there is a problem staffing dispatchers as well. In addition to the pay, dispatchers work long hours and varying shifts, much like the troopers.
Radio operators positions are shift work. They work early shifts, they work late shifts, they work midnight shifts, they work Saturdays and Sundays, they work holidays, and it's very difficult for them to meet that schedule. And if they can get a 9-to-5 job like the post secretaries, they were more than willing at that same pay grade to be employed. But I think that's a problem with the trooper positions too.
According to the Georgia Department of Public Safety, state troopers start out at just over $31,000 a year, and an average trooper makes less than $40,000.
The presentation of the budget for indigent defense drew fire from Senate Judiciary Chair Preston Smith, who was angered by news reports that the General Assembly had underfunded the state's Public Defender's Standards Council.
I guess I'll just add this for your benefit, and that is that a number of us were surprised that your response to running out of money was for you and Chairman Bondurant to go to the media and blame the legislature for failing to fund you, without ever coming to us and discussing with us what your needs were, especially considering how hard we've worked to help you over the last 2 or 3 years. We want to have a full accounting of the agency. As you know, there are no earmarked funds in Georgia. There are no dedicated funding for any agency. You're authorized to make the request up to the full amount of the previous year's fines and collections and so forth, and you've done that, and we've funded that exactly as you've requested. But I think a lot of us have concerns about why now we're being blamed for failing to fund you and hearing about threats to shut down offices when we've done everything we've promised to do.
Judge Smith, the Legislative Oversight Committee, and you particularly, have been extremely helpful and supportive of the work, and I appreciate that. I think what has happened is that we knew last year, and the Legislative Oversight Committee knew, and the Budget Office knew, that we only had enough funds for 9 months of operation. We were asked, and we did, prepare and operate a budget based upon 12 months with only 9 months worth of money, so to speak, available to us. And that's the reason we asked for the $10 million offline appropriation last year. It's not a matter of mismanagement, I would respectfully submit to you. It's a matter that the statute did not allow us to be fully funded during this first year of operation after the collections began.
State funding for the Public Defender's Standards Council is slated to increase from almost $28 million per year to $37 million in fiscal year 2008. State officials never know when a lawsuit may go to trial or when a natural disaster may hit, but preparing for these things is something the Office of Planning and Budget has to do. Director Shelley Nickel finished up budget briefings today and talked about changes in the 2007 supplemental budget.
There are a couple items, just two, that I'd like to point your attention to. One of those is deleting the gubernatorial transition funds of $50,000 that were put in the budget in case there was a transition. The second item is to create a litigation fund for known legal expenses that exist in the Department of Education, the Secretary of State, and the Department of Natural Resources. And the third item is found in GEMA's budget, and it's to provide $125,000 for an uninterruptible power supply. It's basically a backup generator to maintain communications during a disaster.
Nichols said some of the other changes in spending were the result of Georgia's growing and aging population.
Lawmakers will not be seen tomorrow night because the Georgia General Assembly will not be in session. Join us Monday, January 22nd, when the Assembly reconvenes. That's Monday at 7 p.m. If you have missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in tomorrow morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. Now stay tuned for Ask This Old House. Tonight's episode features fixes for clogged drains and a how-to for installing kitchen cabinets. Ask This Old House is coming up next here on GPB.
And that's our broadcast for this, the second and final day of the Joint Appropriations budget briefings at the State Capitol. I'm Wendy Lawson.
And I'm David Zelski. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening.
Good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting. Tonight.